On this channel, we often discuss the deep secrets of the universe and the mind-boggling oddities of the quantum world with you. We're going to do that again. Because while I was researching for a new video, I came across a rather strange hypothesis. This is an article by theoretical physicist Dr. Philip Kurian, written in March 2025, which is a very near date. He says in that article that the total information processing capacity of life is approximately equal to the square root of the total capacity of the observable universe. The square root? Such a mathematical proportion seemed very surprising to me. I'm sure it did to you too. But what's even more surprising is this. The impact of all life on Earth on the universe may be much greater than we think. Now, let me try to explain this to you with a visual. The total information processing capacity of the observable universe, according to previous calculations, is accepted as 10 to the power of 120. I'll get to who calculated that in a moment. If the capacity of the universe is the area of this square, then the total capacity of life is the length of the side of the square, because the square root of a square's area gives the length of one of its sides. So, according to this hypothesis, life occupies such a large place in the universe. So, is this a coincidence? Or does it show that there's a connection between the universe and life that we haven't yet understood? I'll explain in a moment how Kurian calculated this and where this mathematical proportion leads us. But while researching the topic, the famous question asked by Nobel laureate physicist Erwin Schrödinger came to mind. What is life? Schrödinger asked this question 80 years ago. In fact, he didn't just ask the question, he also wrote a book about it. What is life? This is one of the bridge books that connects biology to physics. It also made a great contribution to today's modern molecular biology. Schrödinger actually asks the following in this book. Can what we call life be contained within the laws of physics? In other words, is it possible to explain biology with the laws of physics, especially with quantum physics? For a long time, the scientific community tried to find a brain-focused answer to Schrödinger's question. That is, with a classical computation model. We're talking about an organ that can perform trillions of operations per second and produce consciousness. However, this perspective overlooks a large part of the picture, because the vast majority of living things on Earth do not have a brain. The bacteria that have ruled our planet for billions of years, the vast fungal networks under the soil, the trees that feed on solar energy, or the simplest single-celled organisms at the bottom of the ocean. None of these have a nervous system or a brain in the sense that we think of it. But they all have to survive. They reproduce for this purpose. They interact with their environment. So their mechanism also processes information in some way. So if what we call information processing is limited to neurons, how do these creatures adapt to the world? How do they learn? This is the blind spot of classical biology. To shed light on this, scientists started looking in a completely different place. The quantum world. This is a world where the rules of classical physics don't apply. That strange invisible universe where particles can be in multiple places at once and can form instant connections thanks to entanglement. What have we always associated that universe with until now? With subatomic particles, right? But what if life itself, at the cellular level, is directly connected to the quantum world? I shared a similar topic with you months ago. I made a video explaining whether the human mind operates on quantum laws, and I recommend you watch that one as well. Of course, that was a topic that only dealt with the quantum connection of the human mind. This new field called quantum biology proposes an even more ambitious hypothesis. I'm talking about the hypothesis from the beginning of the video. All life, from the most fundamental level of biology to the most complex structures, might be using quantum laws. So, according to Kurian, where does this extraordinary quantum potential come from? From a very common building block found in each of our cells, the amino acid tryptophan. Tryptophan is also the raw material for serotonin, which is known as the happiness hormone. It's found in abundance in foods like meat, bananas, and milk. But how can such an ordinary molecule carry one of the greatest secrets of life? Tryptophan doesn't work alone. It's located inside proteins called tubulin. When tubulins come together, they form microtubules. These organize themselves into highly symmetrical and orderly networks. And this perfect order triggers one of the most powerful collective effects in quantum physics. Superradiance. I'm aware it's a pretty cool term, and it seems just as complex. But let me try to explain it with a simple analogy. Imagine thousands of people in a stadium shouting at random times. It would just create a chaotic noise, wouldn't it? But if those thousands of people shout at the same time in a synchronized way, the resulting sound would be much more powerful and intense than the sum of the individual sounds. Superradiance is exactly that. Instead of randomly emitting the light energy they absorb, the tryptophan molecules inside the cell become coordinated at the quantum level. They behave like a single giant molecule. They release their energy simultaneously in the form of a much more powerful and orderly pulse of light. A classical neuron transmitting a signal is measured in thousandths of a second, that is, in milliseconds. However, a superradiant pulse of light occurs in picoseconds, that is, in a trillionth of a second. That means a speed increase of more than 1 billion times. So according to Kurian's calculations, thanks to this mechanism, cellular computation can reach speeds of up to 10 trillion operations per second. These aren't science fiction theories or anything. The idea of superradiance was a known theory in physics since the 1950s, and was even observed in simple gas systems in the 70s. But the scientific world didn't think it was very likely that this could also happen in a living cell. Because living cells are hot, wet, and chaotic. Quantum states are extremely fragile in such environments. They break down immediately. So Dr. Kurian and his team conducted an experiment in 2024 that showed the exact opposite. They presented experimental evidence that superradiance can occur in a biological structure, that is, under conditions just like those in a cell. Now, let's get to that strange relationship between the universe and life that we talked about at the beginning. First of all, where does the number 10 to the power of 120 come from? Let me explain. This isn't just a random number, of course. In 2002, quantum physicist Seth Lloyd proposed the following idea. The universe could be a giant quantum computer. According to this perspective, every particle in the universe records some amount of information, and every physical interaction that occurs is a type of computation where this information is processed. You know how we say information processing? Well, this is one of them. Lloyd calculated how many operations the universe might have performed since the Big Bang, and found this mind-boggling number. 10 to the power of 120. So how did he arrive at this conclusion? He said that the more energy there is, the more operations can be performed. Think of a computer. The more power you give its processor, the faster it runs. It's the same for the universe. When we multiply the total energy of the universe by the time that has passed since the Big Bang, we get a massive magnitude of roughly 10 to the power of 87. But this is still a raw number, meaning it's not the number of operations. To convert this into a meaningful number of operations, we need to use nature's smallest measure, the Planck constant. When you factor that in, you get an incredible processing capacity of 10 to the 120 power. So the universe can perform at most this many operations from the moment it was born until today. Now, let's think of the universe as a giant car. The fuel tank is the total energy of the universe. Let the journey time be the age of the universe. And the speed limit is the fundamental limit set by quantum physics. That is the Planck constant. The more fuel in the tank and the longer the journey has been, the more kilometers the car can travel. The same logic applies to the universe. Energy times time divided by the speed limit, which is the number of operations the universe could have performed to date. That's where Lloyd's number, 10 to the power of 120, comes from. This number is so large that even if we tried to count it by increasing it by 1 per second starting from 0, we would have to count for a period many times longer than the age of the universe. So where does the number on the life side, 10 to the power of 60, come from? We talked about superradiance, right? You know, how they could radiate their energy simultaneously in a very powerful way. So when this phenomenon comes into play, according to calculations, a single cell can perform about 10 to the power of 13 basic operations per second. Of course, this is a potential, meaning an upper limit. When we extend this potential to all the cells on Earth, and over the billions of years of life, we get an upper limit on the order of 10 to the power of 60. What's surprising is that the physics-based path shown in Kurian's paper also comes out to almost the same magnitude. When we divide the age of the universe in seconds by Planck time, the smallest unit of time, the result is 10 to the power of 61. In other words, it's almost the same as the number we found based on the potential of the cells. The fact that these two independent paths point to the same order of magnitude suggests there might be an unexpected scale connection between life and the universe. By the way, in recent years, there have been significant developments in the scientific world that support Kurian's hypothesis. In other words, we have some examples suggesting that life might be able to use the strange rules of quantum mechanics. For example, in 2007, laboratory measurements revealed that plants leave behind quantum traces during photosynthesis, that is, while they are collecting light in their leaves. Scientists observe that light doesn't just travel a single path like a particle, but can explore several paths simultaneously, just like a wave. Quantum effects have also been observed in migratory birds. These birds travel for thousands of kilometers, but they never lose their way. The reason for this is their ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field. But it's not just about sensing it. According to research, some birds might perceive the magnetic field in a way that is connected to their sense of sight. Migratory birds have light-sensitive proteins in their retinas called cryptochromes. When light strikes these molecules, one of the electron pairs inside is displaced. These paired electrons remain in a special state called quantum entanglement. The Earth's magnetic field affects the behavior of these entangled pairs on a very small scale. This means the chemical reactions of the cryptochrome molecule vary depending on the magnetic field, and this difference is sent to the bird's brain as a visual signal. In other words, migratory birds adjust their route as if they are seeing compass lines in the sky. Of course, Kurian's hypothesis has not yet been proven. Let's not forget, in science, every revolutionary idea must pass through the most rigorous tests. I often emphasize this in my videos. And this theory also has some important assumptions it must rely on. Of course, as with any hypothesis, this one also sparked debates in the scientific community. The first doubt is this: does every cell really use this capacity, or is it just a potential? Kurian made this calculation assuming that every cell operates at its maximum quantum capacity at all times. But the scientific community is very cautious about this possibility. It's like a very fast car, a Ferrari for example, spending most of its life in city traffic. Then it can't use its full potential, can it? So scientists think that cells don't run their superradiance, their quantum engine, at full throttle all the time. Secondly, the main purpose of this mechanism is being questioned. One of tryptophan's main functions is to act as a shield by absorbing harmful ultraviolet rays that form inside the cell. Critics say that superradiance could be a really efficient byproduct of this shielding function. So there may not be a conscious calculation involved. Perhaps it's just a form of energy management. And finally, the most fundamental criticism is this: what if this mathematical relationship is just an impressive coincidence? I mean, isn't it possible that this result came about because the numbers and assumptions were chosen to fit it perfectly? The scientific community always approaches these kinds of mathematical proportions with skepticism. That's why they're not easily convinced without very definitive proof. Now, in light of all these discussions and assumptions, let's imagine for a moment a future where this hypothesis is true. Imagination is important because that's where everything begins. For example, if this hypothesis is proven, our search for extraterrestrial life could change completely. Instead of just searching for water or chemical traces on other planets, we could look for possible signatures of superradiance in biological structures. This would provide us with a completely new physics-based metric for our search for life in the universe. The validity of this hypothesis could also be a revolution for technology. Billions of years ago, life may have already solved a problem that we are still spending billions of dollars trying to solve. Imagine a fault-tolerant quantum computer that operates at room temperature and repairs itself. Perhaps in the future we'll build nature-inspired quantum computers by mimicking the behavior of cells. For now, these things haven't happened. But that seemingly simple question Schrödinger asked 80 years ago actually opened the door to a new era. Now, quantum biology is providing much deeper and different answers to the question, what is life? Perhaps what we call life is the universe's way of recognizing and computing itself. And perhaps we, as living beings, are the parts of this giant cosmic computer, trying to make sense of its own existence. We don't know if this hypothesis will ever be proven. But even these words from Dr. Philip Kurian, who proposed the hypothesis, are worth pondering. As the story of the universe is being written, we can discover and make sense of this magnificent order. Having such a role is truly awe-inspiring.